So you'll have some tasks to do during the week until next week. All right, so we're going to start with the behavior. Don't forget that learning is about change. Okay, if we look at the slide, I think it was the previous slide here, slide number 3. Learning is about change. Okay, and it's about using learning practices for educational purposes. Okay, so behaviorism. We want to change our students' behavior. I know that sounds terrible, but that's what we do. Okay, the idea, every teacher is in the classroom, whether it's a physical classroom or a virtual classroom. Every teacher wants the students to change, because learning means changing, and you want to change their behavior. So let's say your students say, "I go home now." Okay, that's a wonderful change. They couldn't say anything before, and now they can say, "I go home now." Okay, but you want them to go through a change. So how are you going to get them to go from saying, "I go home now," to saying, "I am going home now"? How are you going to get them from one place to the other? Well, you're going to change their behavior. How will you change their behavior? In the behaviorist way. Okay, so how will you do it? Okay, any ideas? You want to change their behavior. Well, you're going to tolerate. What are you going to do? You have to change their situation, right? You want to change the way they're saying it. They're making a mistake. They're making a grammar mistake. How are you going to get them to change? Well, you might make them repeat it. And every time they say, you're going to say, "I'm going home now." "Oh, I'm going home now." And then they will say, "Oh, yes, I'm going home now." And then they'll repeat it. Next day, they'll come to school and say, "Bye, teacher, I go home now." Boom. So what are you going to do? You're going to have to reinforce and give them rewards. Okay, and that's how it's done, through rewards and correction. Thank you, Fabiana. But rewarding, don't forget, you're going to correct them and reward. Correct them and reward. You're going to do this over and over and over again until they get it, until it becomes automatic. Are you going to explain things? Nah, you're not going to explain. You're just going to make them automatic. No explanations for behaviorists. Okay, now how many of you use a behaviorist approach, or how many of you have learned a language through a behaviorist approach? With lots of repetitions, maybe repeating together. Okay, everybody, together. "I am going home now." Very good. Okay, think about it. How many of you? Okay, give me a thumbs up if you have either taught or have gone through a behaviorist way of learning a language. Okay? That's how we learn. Okay, and then you think of Pavlov and you say, "Oh no, oh no, oh no," because Pavlov and the whole theory of behaviorism sounds terrible, right? But we use it. We use it to this day. Okay, so let's not be afraid. We're using it. Okay? All right, so the behaviorists, we want the environment to show us that the behavior of the learner has changed. So we do everything in the environment so that we see learner behavior change. We look for behavior and we focus on behavior. Yeah, we're not talking about methods, Fabiana. We're talking about theories. We'll talk about behavior. We'll talk about methods. I mentioned this in the first slide, that we're going to be talking about theories, approaches, methods, and class management. Today we're talking about theories, not about approaches, okay? Just theories. Okay, so I'm going back to, okay, the behaviorist theory. So we're trying to change behavior. Universal grammar. Again, who came up with this brilliant idea? Transformational. Who came up? Do you remember? I mentioned at the beginning. Let's see if you remember the guy's name. That's right. Very good, Thomas. Chomsky. That's right, Chomsky. And sometimes it's called Chomskonian. It's called deep grammar, underlying grammar. There are lots of names for it. I don't know how many of you studied it deeply. I did. And I liked it. It was really, really fun to learn it. It's a theory, okay? And the theory says that we are all born. We have what's called innate grammar. Innate grammar means that we're all born with certain grammar parts in our brain. That's what we're born with, okay? So Chomsky's inborn or innate universal grammar theory. That means that everybody, if you're born in China, or you're born in the States, or in Russia, or in Poland, or in Paraguay, or in Germany, who else do we have here? Or in Venezuela, or in Mexico, or in, let's see, other countries that we have here. Give me countries. Argentina, Iceland. I didn't know you were in Iceland. Fabiana, I had no idea you were born in Iceland. Do you live there? Wow. Egypt, excellent. Oh, you're in Argentina, but you were born in Iceland. Wow. Any other countries? India, excellent. All right, so we've got, did I miss a country? So no matter where you were born, okay, no matter where you were born with this innate universal grammar so that you are able, oh, that's right, Uzbekistan, that's right, we've got Uzbekistan as well. You were born with the ability to learn a language because you have the grammar. In other words, you're born with these grammar rules in your brain. How many of you like this theory? Chomsky became very famous with this idea. You like it. Okay, I loved it in the 1970s, I don't know, when it was very popular. And I thought it was brilliant. It was called transformational grammar. We had to do exercises, transformational grammar. We had to do all kinds of exercises, and it was a lot of fun, as I said. With trees, he had trees, these trees, you know, and these graphs and everything. Okay, that's the Chomskyan idea. And then there's Krashen's. Everybody is crazy about Krashen. Krashen is very, very popular. He developed this in the 80s. Right now, Krashen, you can find him, lots of YouTube videos with Krashen. And it's called Krashen's Monitor. And the idea here is about natural language. And that is that you learn your second, third, fourth, foreign, and so on language the same way that you learn the first. Now, it's interesting because before Krashen came up with this idea, I was using it in school because it seemed natural to me too. As a young English teacher, I was still a student, I felt that this was the best way to learn, and I believed in it. I really did. And that's what I practiced, okay? So I based my approach to English language learning through, well, before Krashen was around because his theory came later. I started teaching before. But I based it on the fact that first and second language are learned in the same way. Now, there are a lot of disagreements about this theory. How is it possible to learn a second language when you're over the age of 12, the same way that you learn the first one? Yeah, so it wasn't accepted. Not everybody accepted it. I know when I was using it, not everybody accepted it. But when Krashen came up with his theory, everybody started saying, yeah. Okay? So we acquire a foreign language the same as we acquire the first. So think how you acquire the first. In your house, we hear the language, lots of exposure to the language, your mother language, your first tongue, whatever you want to call it. You hear your parents, you hear your brothers, your sisters, your surroundings. You go to school, you hear the language, and that's how you pick it up. You pick it up naturally because of Chomsky's universal grammar, okay? And that's how you pick up your foreign language. How many of you agree with that? How many of you have learned a language when you were older, a foreign language? Do you find, was it natural for you to learn it? Okay, exactly, Thomas. Most adult learners say, no, it's not natural at all. It's very, very artificial. It's very difficult. I have to know the grammar. If I don't know the grammar, I can't do it. In other words, there's a lot of opposition from adults and even from kids. about this natural way of learning a foreign language. Okay, so it's a theory. And of course, the cognitive theory. The cognition means knowledge. Okay, so it's based on change in knowledge. If you are 0 today, and if you learn something, you become 1. Now you know 1. You are nothing, and then you learn something. So the change is your knowledge. The question is, what do you do with your knowledge? Okay, next time I'm going to talk about constructivism and connectivism and other approaches to language learning. But cognition means that you know something. And grammar is cognition. If you know grammar rules, okay, in a foreign language, that means that you know. The question is, what do you do with it? Okay, so maybe a combination of cognitive and behaviorism. You know something and then you behave and you use it correctly, that might be good. But cognition is only change in knowledge. You have change in knowledge, and that's your behavior. It doesn't mean that you're going to behave that way. So just knowing is a change. So from nothing, and now you know something. So parts of speech. You didn't know parts of speech? You teach your students the parts of speech. They know the parts of speech. That's cognition. Can they use it in real language? No, or maybe yes. Okay, so that's cognition. Exactly. Knowing, just because you know about English doesn't mean that you can speak it, or you write it, or understand what you're reading. Or, so producing doesn't mean anything. So behavior is producing. Cognition is just knowing. Conversation. All right, this is a relatively new theory. And it means exactly what it says. It means that you learn a language through conversation. So I'm sure you've, maybe with a combination of behaviorism, but it's through talking. So you talk, and you get better. First, you need the vocabulary, of course, to be able to talk. But you learn the vocabulary and the grammar through conversation. That's a good point, Thomas. Just because you speak English, that's right, you have no cognition. You might not know anything about the language until you start teaching it, which happened to most of us. Most native speakers of English knew nothing about the English language until they started teaching it. Exactly, Helena. That's the idea. The idea is to learn through conversation. Remember, this is not teaching. We're talking about language learning. How is language learned? These are theories of language learning. They are not theories of language teaching. Those are approaches. We'll talk about approaches and methods of teaching. Right now, we're just talking about language learning. And that's like theories, because teaching is practical. Theories are just theories. The question is, what do you do with the theories? Yeah, I disappeared for a minute because I wanted to fix my glasses. All right, my students do not learn grammar. Okay, that's an approach, Helena. We're talking about theories of language learning. Okay, so let's keep that in mind. So language through conversation. Language learning through conversation means that you base everything on meaning. So if you say, hello, everyone, it's not only the words that you use, it's your body language. Hi, or bye-bye. Okay, so you're using meaning. Collocations, that's right. You're using meaning. And that's how knowledge is constructed. So the brain, we're talking about language learning theory, the brain processes the information from the meaning that it gets. So body language, it's really important to have body language. So you need to see the teacher. You need to see the person in front of you. And you need to see a lot of language speakers. Okay, you need to see them. A lot of nonverbal, that's right. A lot of emotions. Okay, Helena, I think you're going to love this. So language learning through conversation has a lot of feelings and emotions in it, because that's where you get meaning. You construct meaning from what you get, the interactions through the conversation. So if your teacher smiles, you know she's saying something nice. Like she says, hello. So you might not get the hello. It may be good morning or good afternoon or good night, but at least you know that it's something pleasant. The teacher is conversing with you in a pleasant way. All right, so that's learning, language learning theory through conversation. And then there is the final one, which is acculturation. What is acculturation? Okay, this is John Schumann's. Okay, John Schumann's idea was that you learn not a foreign language necessarily, but a second language. When you go to a country, that's where you learn the language. And the reason you learn the language is that you want to be part of the culture. And you know what? This might be a foreign language reason. Why are people motivated to learn English in most parts of the world? Why? Why does everybody want to learn English? English is a huge business. Why? Because people want to be part of the culture. It could be, that's right, lingua. Maybe it's the American culture. Maybe it's the British culture. Maybe, well, I'm not going to say Canadian because there's no such thing as a Canadian culture. American culture, British, maybe Australian, if there is such a thing. But it's mostly American and British, I would say. And maybe globalization. But you know, it's not so, it's being part, you want to be part of some organization. In this case, it's a country. It's a culture. So if you want to be part of a culture, you have to behave. You have to change your behavior. Otherwise, you cannot be identified as part of that culture. So it's identifying with a culture. So when you speak English, do you identify with a certain culture? I know that's a tough question. If you do, see, as a Canadian, I have a problem because Canadians have no identity. They have nothing. It's an immigrant country. So it's not, you're never a Canadian. It's what your parents, where do you come from? It's your, you know, your family culture. So we're talking about when you speak English. So Helena says USA. So you feel like you're part of this culture. Okay? So that's the idea. Your students probably pick it up too. Okay, so that's the idea. The idea is to orient yourself with a culture, and that's how you learn the language. Okay, and you do this through social interactions. So acculturation is actually socialization. Do any of you know anything about sociology? Because this is a sociology idea. That's right, global English, you can take it there. But you're talking about approaches and methods of language teaching. You're not talking about theories, okay? We're talking about sociology. Okay, sociology has acculturation. So if you've ever studied sociology, acculturation, or if you're interested in the idea of acculturation means that you take part in social interactions. Participation, that's right. And don't forget, we're talking about theories of learning. I'm going to repeat this, okay? Theories of learning.